The first time my boss laughed at my business idea, I pretended not to care. I sat there in the Monday sales meeting, his jokes echoing across the glass walls, pretending he didn't just call my startup dream weekend nonsense. But something inside snapped. I wasn't the intern eager for approval anymore. I was an entrepreneur in hiding, nursing a plan that could rewrite my life and, maybe, his dot after hours I coded in the break room, eating stale vending machine crackers, while perfecting the prototype. Every line of code felt like a promise. I will prove you wrong. Yet daytime brought another round of mockery. Stick to cold calls, kid. He'd grin, while the whole floor chuckled. They didn't know I had already registered a tiny LLC, scraped together from savings and pawnshop guitar money. They didn't know the client list I was secretly building, especially the one client our firm bragged about above all others. It started with a single DM on LinkedIn. The client replied, curious about cheaper, smarter software that could slash their overhead. I offered a free demo over coffee, praying my decade-old laptop wouldn't crash. It didn't. They asked for a proposal. I drafted it at 3 a.m., heart pounding louder than the office printer. The next morning, my boss strutted past my cubicle, boasting about renewing that very account. He didn't notice the non-disclosure agreement peeking from my backpack. Days later, I sat in the client's boardroom alone, hands shaking, explaining how my startup, still nameless, still invisible, could automate half their workflow and double their revenue. Their CFO leaned forward. "Can you scale this fast?" I lied. "Absolutely." What happened next flipped our entire industry upside down, turned office whispers into headlines, and forced my boss to confront the unthinkable. His star client was about to walk straight into the waiting arms of the kid he thought would never dare. And that was the first domino in a chain that no one could stop from falling. Before all this happened, I was just another quiet employee buried in spreadsheets, taking lunch at my desk and dreaming of more. I'd watched my boss, Martin, take credit for ideas that weren't his, shut people down with fake charm, and walk around like he owned everyone's future. To him, we were just tools, replaceable, invisible. I kept my head low, but I was always observing, noticing what made the clients stay, what frustrated them, and more importantly, what gaps no one at the company cared to fix. That's where my startup idea was born, not from a wild dream, but from the very problems Martin ignored. I wasn't some genius in a garage. I was broke, tired, and operating on borrowed Wi-Fi. But I believed in one thing: that small solutions, done right, could disrupt big systems. Every night, after logging out of the company's tracker, I'd switch screens and build. The software wasn't flashy, but it worked. And it solved a real pain point one of our biggest clients had been quietly complaining about for months. I knew because I sat in on those calls, muted, taking notes Martin never read. The funny thing is, Martin was too arrogant to notice what was happening. He was too busy chasing awards and posting motivational nonsense online to realize someone in his own office had created something better. Meanwhile, I kept things quiet, acted clueless, and slowly built trust with the client, showing them early builds, getting feedback, improving things every week. It wasn't fast or easy. I was constantly paranoid I'd get caught, especially when Martin randomly started asking if anyone had side gigs. I played dumb, but I knew the moment was coming. The client was interested more than they let on. And Martin had no clue he was about to walk into the biggest blind side of his career. It wasn't just about proving Martin wrong anymore. Somewhere along the way, it became personal. The way he treated people like tools, not teammates. Replaying in my head, there was Jenny from marketing, who pitched a brilliant automation idea during a quarterly review. Martin shut her down mid-sentence, then 3 months later presented the same idea as his own. Or Malik in client support, who stayed late every night solving technical messes, only to be passed over for a promotion that Martin gave to his golfing buddy. These weren't isolated stories, they were the culture. And everyone knew it, but stayed silent because they needed the paycheck. Meanwhile, I kept refining the software and strengthening the relationship with the client. They had a decision to make soon, and I could sense they were leaning in my direction. I didn't push too hard. I just showed them what Martin never did: actual results. One afternoon, after a call, their director messaged me privately. "Why? Aren't you the one running your own firm?" That message stayed with me. It confirmed I wasn't crazy for thinking I could do this. But just when things felt like they were moving forward, Martin threw a curveball. He announced a sudden internal audit, claiming it was for compliance, but clearly trying to sniff out something. My heart sank. I had been careful, never using company assets, but paranoia crept in. Every Slack message, every Dropbox folder, every email, I started second-guessing everything. I couldn't afford to get caught. Not now, not when the client was just days from making a final decision. And, to make things worse, Martin started showing up to calls I used to handle alone. It was like he sensed something was shifting, even if he didn't have the full picture yet. That week, I got a warning email from HR, something vague about conflict of interest policy updates. No names, no direct accusations. I bet it was enough to shake me. Someone was digging. Someone was close. I had to move faster. But speed meant risk. And one wrong step could blow everything. The pressure was suffocating. Every moment at the office felt like walking a tightrope. Martin's mood had changed. He wasn't just smug anymore. He was watchful. I'd catch him pausing at my desk longer than usual, tossing me loaded questions during meetings, and even randomly checking my screen. I kept my face calm, fingers moving over routine tasks, but inside I was constantly rehearsing backup plans. The client still hadn't given a final yes, and every hour that passed made me more paranoid. I stopped staying late. Instead, I worked out of coffee shops and libraries using a burner laptop I'd bought with cash. The prototype was now fully functional, and I had a 2-person freelance team helping polish it. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend at work. If things went wrong, I didn't want anyone else caught in the fallout. But secrets have weight, and carrying this one was starting to show. I missed deadlines at the office, stumbled. During presentations, Martin noticed, and so did HR. Another friendly warning landed in my inbox, worded nicely. But the message was clear: you're being watched. Then came the invite. Our firm's biggest client wanted an in-person strategy review, and Martin decided he'd lead it himself. The same client I'd been quietly building a new system for. The same client who had asked for a final proposal from me off the record. The meeting was scheduled for Friday. I had until then to get them to sign a letter of intent, something concrete that proved they were serious. But they were dragging their feet, still asking legal questions, still discussing internally. Thursday night, I barely slept. I paced my apartment, refreshing my inbox every few minutes. Still no reply. I knew if Martin got there first, pitched some last-minute discounts, or threw in flashier promises, he might win them back. And if that happened, everything I had worked for, the late nights, the risk, the betrayal I was hiding, would mean nothing. Friday morning came like a countdown. I couldn't pause. I got to the office early, hoping to intercept any last-minute updates. But Martin had already left dressed in his best suit, carrying a folder thicker than usual. I kept checking my phone, refreshing my inbox for the client's response. Nothing. My chest felt tight. If they hadn't made a decision by now, they were likely sitting in that boardroom, letting Martin sweet-talk them into another year of mediocre service. But then, just before noon, a message finally came through. It wasn't the signed letter of intent. It was worse. The client's director wrote, Martin just pitched a new dashboard idea. Looks exactly like the one you showed us last week. He said your name was on the internal team that built it. My heart dropped. Somehow, he'd seen my prototype maybe from an old file I forgot to wipe, maybe through someone I trusted. Either way, he had taken it, put his name on it, and was now selling it back to the very client I built it for. I didn't know what stung more, the theft or the fact that it was working. The client was confused, possibly reconsidering, and if they moved forward under Martin's pitch, it would look like I had stolen the idea from him. He'd not only win back the client, but bury my startup before it even launched. I stared at the screen, mind racing. This wasn't just corporate politics anymore, it was personal sabotage. And yet, deep down, I knew Martin didn't have the full code. He had a polished mock-up, but not the engine behind it. That gave me a narrow window to fight back. But then came another blow. HR scheduled an emergency meeting with me immediately. No reason given. My email access was frozen before I could even respond. That's when I realized this wasn't just a warning anymore. Martin was making his final move, and I might already be too late. The HR office was cold and too quiet. I sat across from them, my stomach in knots, as they handed me a printed report. It was a formal investigation and authorized use of company resources, conflict of interest, potential IP theft, all of it worded carefully but clearly meant to corner me. I looked down at the so-called evidence, screenshots of my prototype, notes that I'd written months ago, now marked with company stamps. Martin had gone all in, painting me as the employee who tried to steal from the inside. And just like that, I was suspended pending investigation. I left the building numb, barely hearing the receptionist's forced goodbye. But as I walked out, I got a call on no number. It was the client, not the director I'd been in touch with, but the CEO himself. His voice was sharp. We just had a meeting with Martin. Something didn't add up. His answers were vague. So we did some digging. You built that system, didn't you? I didn't lie. I told him the full story. The late nights, the silent building, the real code behind the flashy copy Martin had shown them. There was a pause. Then he said, "Send over the back-end code. Let's run some tests." That was my opening. I sent everything. Within hours, their engineers confirmed the truth. Martin had no product, only a stolen front. The next morning, the client sent an official notice terminating their contract with the firm. Not only that, they announced a new partnership with my startup, a public post, my name attached. It went viral faster than I expected. Within a week, investors reached out. The story caught wind on tech blogs. I went from a suspended employee to the founder of a funded startup in less than 7 days. Martin, he didn't go down quietly. He filed a lawsuit for IP theft. But here's the twist: one of his own team members, someone he'd thrown under the bus before, came forward with internal emails. Emails where Martin admitted to copying my demo and bluffing his way through the pitch. The case collapsed, and Martin, last I heard, he was quietly retired from the firm. But the twist that even I didn't see coming. That same teammate, Jenny, turned out to be the final puzzle piece. She had ideas I'd never heard, vision I hadn't considered. So, I offered her a seat at the table. Now, we're building something even bigger. Not just a company. A place where people like us overlooked, underestimated, get the last word.